Caleb.
Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams might be changing the draft process forever.
This is a complicated process.
Caleb is the first generation of NIL megastars. They're doing things very differently.
Who's saying essentially he's doing this just to do because it's different. He doesn't want to conform.
No player in the history of the combine
like to, create history and rewrite history.
The NFL Combine has grown to be one of the biggest events outside of the draft during the NFL offseason. Players are expected to go through a gauntlet of agility drills, cognitive evaluations, team interviews, and medical exams, all in order to prove to teams that they deserve to be picked at the highest possible position in the draft. And for good reason. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars at stake here, and there's a huge difference in pay depending on where you go. First-round draft picks make substantially more guaranteed money than the rest of the field, so dropping lower than expected could cost you millions of dollars, which is massive in a league that has the shortest average career length of any major sport. So for the vast majority of these players, every second counts of the combine and pro days, but for other players, not so much. Caleb Williams, the superstar quarterback from Southern California, Heisman Trophy winner who many consider to be the #1 overall pick in the 2024 draft, but who has also been painted by some to be a bit of a villain. He definitely didn't make any friends leaving Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley to go to sunny Los Angeles, and many have pointed out his controversies of crying on the sidelines or painting Utah on his nails, which as a BYU fan, I see nothing wrong with that. The real controversy for me was losing the game afterward, but now with the draft process fully underway, Williams is refusing to play by any of the established rules.
He was coming in a day later than the rest of the quarterbacks.
He hasn't hired an agent.
He wasn't looking to compete and throw. No player in the history of the combine had denied doing medicals. This guy might be just too big a star for the combine.
So all of this leads to a narrative of arrogance and entitlement from a young player who hasn't even taken a snap in the NFL yet. But is that truly the case, or is this just someone on the bleeding edge of change to the draft system as a whole? Well, throwing your weight around at the draft is really nothing new. Eli Manning back in 2004 refused to be drafted by the San Diego Chargers. But why? Well, 8 losing seasons in a row and a spotty track record of developing young quarterbacks in the past, Eli was a bit skeptical. He also had his dad Archie in his corner, who as an ex-player himself never really won anything on a dysfunctional New Orleans team. He no doubt wanted to find the best possible situation for his son to succeed. And it ended up working out. The Chargers traded him to the Giants and he would go on to win 2 Super Bowls. Another instance was Bo Jackson back in 1986. He was the star running back in that year's draft. The Bucs had the #1 pick and they were determined to take him. Only Bo had other plans. He was also a star in baseball and was still deciding which sport he wanted to go pro in.
And once I make my mind up about what I'm going to do, it's going to be because it's what Bo wants and not what somebody else just wants.
The story goes that the Bucs attempted to sabotage his baseball career by flying him out on their private jet for free to perform a physical at their facilities in Tampa Bay. Well, word got out that he took the free flight on a private jet while still being a student at Auburn. This was against the rules at the time, and he would be disqualified from his senior year in baseball. The Bucs still drafted him #1, but either out of spite or outright not wanting to play for the Bucs, he opted for baseball and was drafted in the 4th round to the Kansas City Royals. He would eventually go on to play in the NFL for the Raiders part-time. They offered him an agreement to play for them after the baseball season was over, and he was awesome for the Raiders, but unfortunately his career was cut short due to injury. But I would hardly consider his decision not to be drafted by the Bucs a bad one, especially when you consider they had Steve Young as their quarterback at the time, who was thought by many to be a bust during his time at Tampa, only to be traded to the 49ers, eventually win a Super Bowl and have a Hall of Fame career. Truly, where you play matters. And the common thread amongst all of these stories is leverage. And today's athletes have more than ever thanks to NIL. It's estimated Caleb Williams made close to $10 million during his 2 years at USC. So if he actually wanted to wait out a team that he didn't want to be drafted by, he could. I believe teams only have the rights to draft you for 1 year, but I don't think it's so much about that for Caleb as it is challenging the draft process as a whole. For these top NFL prospects, there really isn't a whole lot to gain from the combine. They've pretty much already showed NFL teams that they're worth the risk with their top picks. Posting a 40 time or throwing passes without pads and without a 300-pound defensive lineman rushing you isn't telling them any more than a stellar performance in a high leverage situation in an actual game. In fact, in some cases, it can only hurt. Last year, star quarterback CJ Stroud was considered to be one of the top 2 picks in the draft. He had an incredible career at Ohio State and was looking to be a future star in the NFL. But then this happened.
The Stroud one was being used against him. And I know that is not what you guys wanted at all.
Where do the leaks come from, you think? Are the leaks accurate? And what should we take from that particular leak?
CJ's S2 cognitive evaluation was leaked online, and these evaluations are supposed to measure the speed at which athletes process information, a pretty important skill for a quarterback. Well, CJ's score was leaked to be in the 18th percentile, and it was all over the headlines. CJ Stroud bound to be a bust. Now, this ultimately didn't really affect him. He still was drafted number 2 overall, but the rumors and the headlines certainly didn't help, and this is something we see a lot throughout the build-up leading up to the draft. CJ went on to win Offensive Rookie of the Year and looks to be one of the best young quarterbacks we've seen in a while. So do I think all of this means an end to the combine? Absolutely not. I do think what we're seeing from Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. could be the start of a trend for these top NFL draft picks. But those players outside of the top 10 or so don't really have that same leverage to be opting out of these events without severely hurting their draft stock. I think the combine and pro days are really going to be for players looking to stand out among the other good players, but not the generational players. I mean, some could argue that Zach Wilson earned himself a second pick in the 2021 draft off this throw alone. So overall, I definitely think we're going to see some major changes to the draft process over the next few years. I mean, imagine what Dion and Shador have cooking up when he enters the league. I have my popcorn ready, that's all I'm going to say. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.